Good evening. Welcome to the West Fargo City Commission meeting for March 15th. Before we start this evening, I'd like to congratulate the West Fargo Cheyenne Mustangs and the West Fargo Packers for their showing this weekend at the state tournament. And special congratulations to the West Fargo Packers for being the state champions. Both teams conducted themselves terrifically on the floor. The coaches, all of the student managers and everyone, they did a nice job. There was lots of compliments that came back towards the city of West Fargo about that. So our congratulations from the commission and to the school administration for the way that not only they played on the floor, but for the manner in which they conducted themselves in Bismarck. So that's it. I'd also like to acknowledge that on Friday, there was a retirement, and I'm assuming that Chief Otterness might mention this in his report this evening, but a longtime public servant of the city of West Fargo, Sergeant Terry Strife, retired. And Sergeant Strife was not only an exemplary police officer, but was engaged in so many elements of our community, working with children and youth and the church, and it goes on and on and on. So after 32 years, Sergeant Strife had his last call and he had retired. So if any of you know Sergeant Strife, now Terry, he's a civilian, please reach out to him and congratulate him and his family, his wife, and his son Garrett. So with that, please join me in a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we do start, also, Commissioner Mark Simmons is joining us virtually this evening. He's doing some traveling, but took time out of his schedule to join us. So Commissioner Simmons is here and will be a voting member of all of the actions that we take this evening. First order of business is to approve the order of the agenda. Commissioners?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdevig. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the order of the agenda. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Ms. Richard, do we have, is Commissioner Simmons on? I didn't hear him vote.
Aye.
There he is. Okay. Just wanted to make sure that the commissioner has an opportunity to participate. The next order of business is the approval of the minutes of the March 1st meeting, 2021. Are there any additions or corrections, comments?
Was the name on one of the individuals who spoke wrong last week?
I don't know that, Commissioner George.
I just thought I read one of the names that I thought it was, the last name was mistaken on one of them.
I'll check how that.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner George. Bob Jensen? It was Mr. Jensen.
Jensen, that's what I thought. I was
Thank you,
thinking it was
Mandy.
Jensen, not Johnson.
Bob's back there going like this, so I assume that he's not, so Mr. Bob Jensen. Thank you, Commissioner George.
I'll make a motion to approve with that correction.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Been moved, and is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner George seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes with one amendment of Mr. Jensen's name in the minutes for the March 1st, 2021 City Commission meeting. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next item is the building permits. They have been distributed. They are in the packet. Any questions of planning and zoning and or inspections on the building permit activity?
I'll move to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdevig seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the building permit as distributed. Discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next order of business is a consent agenda. We have items A through P. Is there any additions, questions, comments, suggestions on the consent agenda from the commission?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner George. Been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdevig seconds. It's been moved and seconded to accept the consent agenda as presented, items A through P. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Our next order of business is moving into the regular agenda. Item number 1 on the regular agenda is the second reading of a zoning ordinance text amendment, approval of a conditional use permits for seasonal sale of retail goods and increased signage in agricultural district, and final approval of BPF subdivision with conditions noted in the staff report. Mr. Tim Solberg, Assistant City Administrator.
Thank you, President Dardis, Commissioners. You recall the last meeting, we had the first reading for the proposal to add seasonal sale of retail goods to the agricultural district. This was in response to black powder fireworks moving. We preferred, rather than zone this area industrial, that we add this provision within the agricultural district. So tonight we're asking for the second reading of that. We did hold a public hearing during that, in which we had commentary from the applicant. I'll also add that tonight we propose to approve the final plat of BPF subdivision and approve that conditional use to allow for the seasonal sale of retail goods. I'll take you to the last page or the last pages of the packet that was provided to you and look at the conditional use permit. This is the permit that we actually record against the property. I will note in there the conditions that we had for approval within the staff report are outlined. Number 1, seasonal sale of retail goods is to be for the sale of fireworks within the legal time period granted within the state of North Dakota, at which time the city has annexed the property into city limits. The conditional use permit will no longer be valid and the owner will be required to cease the use of seasonal sale of retail goods. Second, the conditional use permit may be brought for review or revocation if rights to the property are sold, conveyed, or otherwise transferred, or if 4 or more complaints are received within 60 days regarding garbage, noise, lighting, or other nuisance factors. The rest of the details in that are the typical of our conditional use permit that our city attorney has helped us draft. I did send this both to the owners and to the adjacent property owner that was most affected, and I was given an email that they were comfortable with what was written in there. So with that, I'm available for any questions, and Mr. Brennan is here as well for any questions you might have of him.
Thank you, Mr. Solberg. Questions for Mr. Solberg? Commissioner Olson.
This is just the replatting of it. It's not the building permit, correct?
The building permit will have to come through the building inspections office. They are not asking for that to be done in any at their own risk manner now. Now we'll be able to actually issue it. So
we are voting on the second reading.
yes, and I did also, I should say of note, since I have the opportunity, I did include in your packet a result of the flood study that was done. This is interesting to a person like myself and Dustin Scott. The new flood map that's coming out doesn't have a floodway. So typically you have a floodway, stay out of that area for development. The new way of doing it in this Western Cass flood insurance study that will be soon adopted is that you have to actually update the model. And so we had more engineering as part of the permitting process run that model for this, and they show that there's no increased storage difference within this section. So even though that they're increasing the fill here, the section is large enough to handle that increased fill and there's no displacement. So it's really neat to see it in action. This will be how we regulate the floodplain in the Western Cass flood insurance study, which essentially is anything west of town. So glad to see it work in action.
Thank you, Mr. Solberg. Any additional questions? Okay, commissioners, what's your pleasure?
Move to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner George. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdevig seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the second reading and the final approval of the zoning ordinance text amendment approval of a conditional use permit for seasonal sale of retail goods and increased signage in an agricultural district. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Sobert. Item number 2 is a second reading and final approval of Westview 5th Edition replat and rezoning from an R-1 SM to a mixed 1 and 2 family dwelling to a PUD, planned unit development. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Commission President. As you recall, at the last City Commission meeting, we had the first reading of A-24-3, which is the PUD for this area. The Planning and Zoning Commission approved both the concept plan and the detailed development plans for the project with a number of additional requirements, including that the 2 single-story office buildings would be limited to professional uses as permitted in the C-OP Commercial Office Park District standards, and that concerns of the adjacent neighborhood were given due consideration. At the City Commission's first reading, the public hearing, a number of residents who live north of the proposed development voiced concerns relating to increased traffic and a need for greater buffering. The commission directed staff to work with the developer to look into these concerns. To address the landscaping issue, the developer has created a landscaping plan for the development, which is included in your packets this evening. The developer has also eliminated one of the access points to the church from 7th Street East to address the traffic, and the updated site plan is also in your packets as well. I know there's been multiple communications between the developer, the concerned residents, Mayor Dardis, some commission members, the city, and letters both in support and opposition of the project have been submitted to us. And some of those letters, which didn't make it in time to make it into your commission packets, I emailed you this weekend. I also have printouts if anyone needs those as well. It is recommended that the city approve the proposed replat and rezoning on the basis that the project is consistent with city plans and ordinances with recommended conditions as they appear in your packets. As mentioned at the last City Commission meeting, a formal protest letter was submitted and signed by more than 20% of notified residents within 150 feet of the proposed project. Due to this letter, as per City Ordinance 4-432.6, the approval of the rezoning shall not become effective except by a favorable vote of 3/4 of all members of the City Commission. This is the second reading of the rezoning and is not a public hearing. With that, I'm available for any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Commissioners, do you have questions, Mr. Peterson?
Yes, I have one thing, and I don't
Commissioner
know if
George.
this would be for Mr. Peterson so much as maybe city staff. One of the issues that was brought up over and over was the traffic, and I know that was more in relation to the school, but has anybody had any chance to talk to the school or anything as far as those concerns go?
I have not had any chance to talk with the schools, and I don't believe staff has as well. I have talked to the city's traffic engineer, Andrew Rucky, about this issue, and he said one potential solution, if traffic is still of a concern, would be to make the intersection for 7th Street East and 40th Avenue a 3/4 axis, which would basically mean that traffic turning from 40th to 7th would still be able to turn onto that road in the same manner it is turning right now. But if you were traveling from 7th out to 40th, you would not be able to travel east. And then in that scenario, traffic would basically be filtering north then up to 36th. And then no U-turn signage would be placed at the intersection of 40th and 4th. So while this would probably filter traffic to the north to 36, so those school drop-offs in the morning and in the afternoon, he said it would still probably be inconvenient to the neighbors and the residents who live in that area because you would no longer be able to travel east towards veterans from that scenario or in that scenario. But that was, he said another potential solution could be to do a traffic study. And the traffic study, if it would warrant it, would maybe show the need for a traffic signal light. But in that scenario, the traffic signal lights cost would be assessed to the neighborhood as well, which probably wouldn't be the best solution as well. So those were the only two potential solutions he could come up with.
How about, I know Commissioner Olson had mentioned signage. as far as maybe right turns only during certain periods of time? Has anything like that been discussed or?
We did discuss it. So I believe that conversation mostly dealt with turning onto 7th from the church access. So the developer has limited access down to one axis. So there was the potential for that second axis, but we didn't have any other conversations relating to that potential scenario.
Thank you.
Additional questions of Mr. Peterson? With regard to Commissioner George's question about the schools, I did the research on that. And when the school was being developed, they paid for the extra width of the road by assessment, as well as the whole parking lane that's on the east side of that street. All of that was assessed to the city, or to the West Fargo Public Schools. So, from the very beginning in the planning, they were acknowledging that there was going to be buses or parents stacking up, parking for athletic facilities that are on that backside, whether it's the practice fields or the baseball or softball or whatever the case might be. But there were, the West Fargo Public Schools paid all of that extra to make that road wider. Just for information, I guess. Please, Commissioner.
Just to confirm what I understand from the letter you sent this weekend that I saw, Malachi. So the church is going to replace some of the dead trees on the north end of their property and add some trees along there as well as part of this, correct?
There's been some discussion about that as well. I don't think I've received one way or the other, but I think it's something that they have mentioned that they're open to.
Okay, because
Mayor? Can you hear me, Mayor?
Commissioner Simmons, you have the floor.
Thank you. I wasn't sure if you could hear me. Malachi, just so I'm understanding this right. I mean, I like PUDs because we can always, change things as we move forward. And I'm assuming this is the same way, correct? That as just because we don't have the answers this minute, doesn't mean that we won't resolve them as we move forward with this project. Is that accurate?
Correct. So the city has a lot of leeway with how we design PUDs. We generally use the underlying zoning, or what would be the underlying zoning, as sort of a guideline or guardrails of what we would require within the initial PUD. If a change ever did come along, so if the developer decided to do something that was different from what was presented here in the detailed development plans, we would have to do a PUD amendment, which would require coming back to this body again.
And as well, the citizens also have that protection, correct?
Can you say that one more time?
Could you
As
repeat,
well,
Mark?
the citizens have that protection as well, correct?
Correct. So I believe, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, but I believe that there would be a public input within that process as well.
PUD amendment requires another public hearing. I think though, to specifically speak to the landscaping under the underlying district of R1SM wouldn't have been required. A church is a permitted use by right within the R1SM district. So they're not required to buffer next to the other R1SM zoning district. However, they were required to meet plant unit standards. And so what we need to look at based on these pictures is these trees that are in disrepair or maybe dead. Do they still meet plant unit standards? If they don't, then we simply cite them in violation, which we generally work it out before it gets to that point.
when I just pulled up the letter that they sent, and they state right in there that they will be happy to replace those trees as required.
Which, going off of Mr. Solberg's presentation there, but I did look at the permit that was issued back in 2012 for the church. And within that, it did say that they were required to have 1,114 plant units. But that's also a little confusing because how we decide on plant units, like a large tree, for instance, could count as 6 plant units versus a small shrub, which could be 3 plant units. And then it goes into deciduous trees and coniferous trees and things like that. And so
Unnecessarily difficult, huh?
Yes.
I was contacted by a number of the residents in the area, met with two gentlemen, which was a very pleasant conversation. The next day I met with a developer, and that was a very pleasant conversation as well. These are two groups of great people that are trying to keep the integrity of their neighborhood as such, as well as a developer that is understanding of what their concerns are. So my understanding is, again, with the letter that Commissioner Jurdevig has referenced earlier, is that there is an agreement that the church would replace some of those trees. I've been to the site 3 times. Once after visiting with the developer and some of the points that he made, and once after meeting with Mr. Supa and Mr. Knutson on the points they made. And then I walked the tree line. I walked and walked by every tree planting that's on the north side of the church, and they're in tough shape. There are sticks stuck in the ground, and there are some dead trees, but so it is my hope that, that those two groups, and I know that the developer has met with some of the residents as well, and I understand that was a pleasant enough conversation. So I would not like to have another public hearing on a PUD. I would hope that there'd be some type of agreement reached between the two parties. That is, it's never going to be totally satisfactory, obviously, but if there's intent and willingness to do some additional plannings, I think that's a very positive thing for everybody involved. So with that being said, again, Mr. Soberg or Mr. Peterson, this is a final approval this evening. So if we do approve the PUD, and again, as Mr. Soberg just pointed out, there are no other conditions because of the nature of how the church is zoned. So the public needs to understand that. I need the residents to understand that. We do have the developer in here, and he has made some very positive statements that what he is willing to work with the church with and give them some direction. So I'm going to break protocol a little bit. Mark, would you step to the microphone, please? Introduce yourself and your address, and just share with what your client and what you folks think you can do. And my apologies for breaking protocol, but I think that we do not want to go to another public PUD hearing.
Yeah.
Sir.
So Mark Buckles with the development group, address 3010 Cheyenne River Way of West Fargo. There you go. Appreciate the dialogue and the opportunity to be here this evening, and really appreciative of just the cordial discussion. We're in North Dakota when groups are getting together, trying to work things out, and meeting face to face, eyeball to eyeball, and just having the conversations about how they feel. As Mr. Mayor mentioned, we met with Dale and Tony and just found them to be great people, as you mentioned. Very cordial conversation in their expression to get dead trees replaced and concerns about lighting and traffic. And I felt that we had a good conversation. And as I said, we wanted to listen to the concerns. Part of what I explained to them is when we proposed this initially, and they probably, you don't know what's going on in the background, but when we looked at this initially, we wanted to propose what fit for the area. It's often a development thing to maybe over propose and have your fallback to what your plan actually is. We wanted to take into account the neighbor concerns when we made this development initially. Townhomes, trying to limit the density as much as possible, not go with a multi-story, multi-family project. As you spoke about this evening, we agreed to the COP, which would be a lower density use in addressing traffic concerns. We eliminated an approach on the northern portion of 7th that could be usable and just had commitment to do the one in hopes that we'll shift traffic to 40th. We did provide the photometric study, the additional landscaping. I think the city policy is great in terms of the townhomes. It's not really, I don't think, a discussion this evening. So really it comes down to the church. And I think the neighborly thing to do, and I know that I guess I don't want to speak for them, but I think that Burning Hearts Church, they want and have a desire to be a great neighbor, part of the community in West Fargo, replacing trees, taking into consideration, not looking at trailers and things of that nature, that, you know, their phone line's open. And I know that they would be happy to have conversations, and they themselves met with Dale and Tony and maybe some other community members at that time. So, you know, we're here to take part in the dialogue, and we really appreciate it all. And I know it's not an easy thing for any change that happens, and we want to just have that change be as lessened impact as possible to those neighbors.
Thank you, Mr. Buchholz.
Sure.
The representative from Burning Hearts, would anyone like to say something? Please. Introduce yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Ted Sawchuk. Actually live in Fargo, but moving to West Fargo here pretty quick. So got a lot. We're buying, sold our
It's a
house.
good way
on-
to start your
Yeah,
comments.
sold our house. Yeah, sold our house Saturday, and we're moving to West Fargo. So thank you for the opportunity. I'm sorry that I was trying to get online last time, but I'm chairman of the board, president of the church, and yeah, we want to be good neighbors. If there are, you know, in the middle of the winter when we bought this property, you know, looking at trees, it's hard to know what's viable and what's not. But, you know, stuff that needs to get replaced, we will very much do that. We want our property to look good. We're a church. I think there's been some misconception about what, you know, where we're going, what we're doing. We're a church. We plan to be a church. We have no immediate plans to add on to the building. We have no immediate plans to, there are talks of daycare, things like that. We have, these have not been in our vision. I'm not going to put God in a box and say, you know, he's not going to do something or, you know, feel that we would do that, but we have no immediate plans for that. We're a church. We'll be a good neighbor. I know the, you know, previous church had been kind of slowing down and not been available and had been gone off, you know, online and all that. So they weren't there. So if there's weeds, grass that we need to plant, we'll do that. Sure, we'll maintain it. If there's some trees we got to put in to make it look good, we want to make it look good. So we'll do what we need to do that. So I wish to assure you guys that, but we're excited. We want to move into this church and get started, and we want to be good neighbors. And thanks for the opportunity to ask for that. So
Thank you very much, sir.
Okay.
And to the Burning Hearts Church, welcome to West Fargo. Would one person, please, from the neighborhood, I'm already in trouble probably with the rest of my commissioners for breaking protocol because we don't want to go till 10:30 again tonight, but is there one person from the neighbor? Tony, would you like to speak? Dale, either one of you? We're going to let all three parties speak.
All right, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Please state your name.
Dale Knutson, I am at 631 Westview Lane East and on the north side of the property, church property. I appreciate the dialogue a lot, and we're looking for good solutions also. We think those solutions will not decrease our property values as they could without an acceptable solution. I do, and I appreciate Burning Heart's commitment. I will say that I think there are some concerns to be met as far as the trees. When I look at what's depicted on the blueprint, it shows 4 trees behind my house. And there is 1 tree behind my house.
That's the original plan.
It's a later plan. It's the one in the last packet,
Okay,
the
very
second
good.
reading packet.
Thank you.
So that whole depiction of trees along there is, it says existing trees. They are not. And I would say that even if they were, that the trees will look nice. It would be, my understanding with those trees is it would be a conifer and a deciduous, every other one. It doesn't say that in the print, but that's how the previous print had laid it out, I believe. But even those trees, whether deciduous and an evergreen, the trees will look nice, but they will not be a buffer, so to speak, for over toward the parking lot, any nuisance lighting, those types of things. I think a generous buffer would enhance both the property of the church. It would, of course, enhance our property. It may have a better impact on not affecting property values. And I believe that it would be aesthetically appealing to the city of West Fargo. So to just replace the trees that are missing, that's not a solution, I don't believe. I think that needs to be done, but I think more is required. Looking at what I believe to be the proper buffer was a 50-foot, but even going down to what's going to be put on the north side of the apartments, that's a 20-foot. But even with the 20-foot, at least when they're calling out trees, they're calling out a small evergreen. A small evergreen is 3 to 4 feet high to begin with. That's where it starts. And we've got trees that are less than a foot high. And then, of course, you saw there's dead trees. I sent you all pictures. There are places where a tree used to be, and you can just barely see the stump there. But even when all of those were in, it was not as depicted in that blueprint.
Thank you, Mr. Knutson.
Yes,
Appreciate your comments.
thank you.
Thank you all. Again, this is a final reading to approval of the PUD. There are terms here that we're using. There's plantings, vegetation plantings, and there's buffers. If you look at the blueprint, the townhomes that are being proposed for this, there is a buffering to the north there. And that is depicted very clearly on the blueprint. On the other parts of the blueprint, the original plan of Faith Journey Church and the like, that Mr. Knutson was referencing to, there were tree plantings that were supposed to take place. It's short of what that was unless they've died and just moved on. So there's two different things here, is plantings and a buffering. And the requirement of the PUD is not for buffering. Just to be clear with that. Mr. Solberg, am I correct in that?
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, to be clear, the church as it currently sits does not require a buffer yard. So when we would issue a permit for the church, it did not require a buffer yard. It required plantings.
Yes, sir. So the point that I was making when I met with Mr. Buchholz and of course with the folks of Burning Hearts and some of theirs, it was the intent is that as they move forward with this project, that we definitely replace the trees that are dead and or dying, or that are missing from the print. And we have verbal commitment from the chairman of the board of Burning Hearts that they will be there. I have a commitment from Mr. Buchholz that he will work with that as well. So again, the thing what we're trying to avoid this evening is another special meeting PUD where we're going to address this. So to the neighborhood, I appeal to you to give these people a chance. They've owned it since last Friday, I believe. And obviously it's not a good time to be planting trees right now. So with that, Commissioner Olson.
Oh, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. To get it, I mean, to get it to where you want it to be today, in all seriousness, to what you want immediately won't happen for a good 20 years to get to be that point where you're not going to be able to see as much as you see today. So everybody has to take that in consideration too. So the best time to have planted these trees was 20 years ago, but nothing was there other than a field, and it was probably soybeans and corn. So keep that in mind too.
So with that, we'll move on. Any more questions of Malachi? To all those involved, we're going to keep all of your comments in the back of our minds, and we'll be watching. Commissioner Olson, you had one more point?
I was going to make the motion to approve the second reading.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdovich seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the second reading of the Westview 5th edition. As soon as I find it, we'll be okay here. Westview 5th edition replat and rezoning from R-1SM to mixed 1 and 2 family dwellings to a PUD. Is there any further discussion? I'm continuing to look at Mr. Commissioner Simmons to make sure that he's not raising his hand or waving at me. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Commissioner Simmons voted in the affirmative. Item number 3 is a second reading for all proposed ordinance amendments. Proposed amendments to Chapter 5 Buildings, Chapter 6 Fire Protection and Prevention, Chapter 7 Heating and Air Conditioning and Combustion Units. Mr. Mark Hausch, Director of Inspections. Please, sir.
I haven't had any other comments since the first reading, so I don't know if there's any questions or more from you.
Thank you, Mr. Hausch. This is a very detailed, it's in the packets. It's, I don't know, 70, 80, 90 pages, I would imagine. So what this is that we're updating our city codes to everything that has been done with the change in state codes and federal codes. So we are in compliance. Our building inspection folks have also worked in unison with the Fargo Planning and Zoning, as well as Moorhead. Well, Moorhead would be a little different. There's some state deal, but so there's continuance of the same type of changes for both cities. So the contractors aren't doing one thing in one city and one in the other. So I commend staff for doing that. So are there any questions of Mr. Hausch? This is a second reading for the proposed ordinance amendments. Your pleasure.
I'll move to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner George. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdovic seconds. Been moved and second to approve the second reading of all proposed ordinance amendments. Chapter 5 Buildings, Chapter 6 Fire Protection and Prevention, Chapter 7 Heating, Air Conditioning, and Combustible Units. Is there any further discussion?
I was going to ask Mr. Hausch to read them all to us, but for the sake of time, I won't. I wanted to see Mark's reaction to that one, and our mayor's too.
Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hausch. Item number 4 is the approve the code enforcement policy. Mr. Johnson, Code Enforcement Coordinator for the City of West Fargo. Welcome this evening.
Good evening, Mr. President, Commissioners. I apologize. I got to scroll through all 94 of Mark's pages
It is 94. I knew it was close to that.
or something like that. All right, so tonight I'm looking to you for approval of a code enforcement policy. The purpose of this policy is to create a shared understanding for many or all of the issues my department generally deals with, as far as what kind of timelines one can expect and what happens if non-compliance continues to be met. This past December, I spoke during a brown bag presentation regarding code enforcement on what I do and what some of the issues are in code enforcement. I wanted to build off of that and provide a policy which outlines violations and expectations as far as enforcing these matters. To summarize the table that you see in these pages, essentially most of the public nuisance violations found in Chapter 15 of the city ordinances, I'm looking to allow a 14 to 30 day compliance period. This is based off of my experience these last 14 months and what's realistic as far as enforcement and allowing reasonable timelines to citizens that, for example, illegal storage of junk. Many of those issues tend to be a pretty great extent as far as what's there and what's not. And in the public nuisance violation section, it says that we can allow no less than 48 hours. 48 hours, it wouldn't be reasonable based on my experience with them. We'd be setting them up for failure. And so that's why in most of these cases for anything under Chapter 15, I would be looking at a 14 to 30-day compliance period. The one exception is tall grass and weeds, in which case they have a 7-day compliance period, which aligns with most surrounding jurisdictions in the area and their ordinances. Other violations, such as planning and zoning issues found in Chapter 4, require no less than 30 days for the compliance period, not changing anything, just going off of what the Chapter 4 says already. So 30 days, whether it be parking a vehicle on grass. For most violations of city ordinances, with the exception of tall grass and weeds and snow on a public sidewalk, non-compliance will result in referral to the city attorney in accordance with Chapter 1-0211, which is basically looking at an infraction. One thing this policy points out is what constitutes when a case will be referred to the city attorney. Let's see. If a property owner shows signs of progress or attempts to work on the issue, such as getting in touch with me, or they're making any necessary changes, but maybe they're not 100% there, reasonable extensions can be granted. But if there are no attempts at progress or contact, extensions should not be granted. In this policy, specifically for Chapter 15 public nuisance offenses, it points out that if cases have already gone through the court process, whether they pleaded guilty or not guilty, that doesn't necessarily alleviate the issue that's there. It just says whether they're guilty or not guilty. So in those cases, because they tend to be the longest ones that drag out for long periods of times, those cases can be referred to the city commission for a hearing in which the property owner has received notice on whether or not to abate the violation and then charge expenses back to the property owner when it's all said and done. That part is meant to assist me in the cases or violations which have been ongoing for long periods of time, generally 6 months or longer, and take up a lot of our time as city staff. And these include cases that came to me when I started in January of 2020. There's still 1 or 2 present. I just want to end this by pointing out that the policy is meant to provide reasonable and consistent timelines to property owners while still holding people accountable for our ordinances. With that, I'm open to any questions you may have for me.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Commissioners, do you have questions of him?
Mayor?
Commissioner Simmons, you have the floor.
Thank you. Travis, I just for clarification, I guess maybe for me, I see all these things, it's no less than 30 days, no less than 60. How about no more than? Where does that fall into play?
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. So to summarize, what I do in these cases is I give them 30 days notice. So that is the compliance period that they are given. The reason I put no less than is taking into factor if we get to that time period and they have made those attempts to contact me, or they have made attempts to start fixing the situation, or maybe they have a plan in place, then that way they can possibly be granted an extension. But that's otherwise the compliance period is 30 days or 14 days if it's not a large issue at hand.
Okay, it just doesn't seem, I guess, clear to me that it's no more than 30 days. You know what I'm saying? It just, they all seem kind of like, maybe I'm reading it wrong, I'm not sure, but it all seems like no less than, rather than if, I guess if we went to court and I would say to you, well, there's no, you don't really say when I have to have it done for sure. You just say no less than, you don't say no more than, but that's probably just my reading of it, I guess. So I'm fine with it.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Commissioner Olson.
So what you're trying to say, Travis, is like in regards to tall grass, no less than 7 days is the compliance timeline. You're not going to set a timeline less than 7 days to the property owner and say 5 days. You're going to give them at least 7 days to come into compliance, not change it on them. Is that what you're trying to say by saying no less than?
Correct. They'll receive a letter and it's going to have a date 7 days from the date that I inspected it. And with those grass cases, those ones, we actually have to have it done by that date. Otherwise, we will have to hire a contractor to abate that.
Expound on that, Travis, that when it reaches that 7-day period and you hire a contractor.
Mhm.
Okay, so the city of West Fargo hires a contractor, then what transpires with that invoice, that bill from the contractor?
So what we have done is, like I said, they reach the compliance date. If the compliance is not met, I reach out to the contractor, which we have had the contractor through an RFP that we've sent out. The contractor responds usually within 2 to 3 days at the latest. They abate, if it's tall grass and weeds, they'll mow the grass. And then what they'll do is they'll send me an invoice for their services. And from that point, and I guess I didn't go onto it, but it is in here. So what happens is I work with finance to send them a spreadsheet regarding the property owner of the violation in question. And they receive a bill regarding the service fee and an administrative fee of $75. The $75 being to cover our time.
Okay, and that is, they are invoiced for that. What if they don't remit a check?
My understanding is that that if they do not pay it, it eventually is assessed to the property.
That's what I wanted you to say to the public. I realize what the process is.
Mhm.
I wanted you to share with the public what it is. Commissioner Simmons, did you have another question?
I did. Thank you, Mayor. I'm just assuming, Travis, this has all gone through John Shockley, correct?
Can you say that again, Commissioner Simmons?
I'm assuming this has all gone through John Shockley?
Has all of this gone through our legal counsel with regard to the days that you're waiting and the whole process?
I communicate with Sarah usually regarding my cases.
It has been communicated through Onstead Twitchell, our legal team, yes. We work this particular part of it, Commissioner Simmons, I think, is done with Sarah.
Okay, so it has been approved by our city attorney, though, is all I'm asking.
That is correct,
Mhm.
Commissioner Simmons. Mr. Shockley is nodding his head profusely.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments for us, Travis?
No.
Nice job. Without a doubt, you have one of the most difficult jobs in West Fargo. Keep up the good work. All right.
Is there a recommended motion? or-
Yeah, we'll have to, this is an actionable item. We have to have a motion on it.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdevig. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the code enforcement policy as presented by Mr. Johnson, the code enforcement coordinator for the city of West Fargo. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Commissioner Simmons voted in the affirmative. Next order of business is the Board of Adjustment. Consider an appeal of interpretation of 4-446 of the city ordinances at 978 Albert Drive West. Mr. Johnson.
All right, so I am going to read my portion of it before the property owner himself speaks on his behalf, unless there's another way that we are supposed to do this. So regarding this matter, I received a complaint on January 15th by email from a citizen regarding a vehicle being parked on the grass at 978 Albert Drive West. I recognize this address from the same issue occurring last year. I was able to observe and confirm this violation on January 18th. and 4-446 C.2 of the city ordinances. It states that parking or storage may occur on an improved surface with the required rear yard, provided that a 3-foot setback be maintained for rear or side lot lines. An improved surface is defined as durable surface to include concrete or bituminous or gravel only where the existing driveway has not been improved to concrete or asphalt. Grass or dirt shall not constitute a durable surface. I had the property owner's phone number from last year, and I made contact with them to let him know his vehicle needed to be moved within 30 days. I also sent a violation letter to his address with the compliance date of February 18th, 2021. On February 16th, I had spoke with the property owner on the phone. I was calling him back regarding a voicemail he had left on the West Fargo main line. During this call, I asked if he had moved the vehicle, to which he had stated he had not. At this time, I was notified by the property owner of his desire to appeal the ruling of the violation in front of the Board of Adjustments. And later that day, he did send me a written appeal through email. At that time, myself and Tim Solberg reached out to John Shockley regarding the next steps for the appeal. And the compliance date of February 18th passed, and the vehicle was still parked on the grass in the backyard. On February 23rd, I called the property owner and notified him the hearing for this matter would be today, March 15th, at the City Commission hearing. And on March 1st, I called him to confirm that the meeting would be in person. As of this morning, March 15th, I observed the vehicle to still be parked on the grass in the backyard. At this time, I'm open to any questions you may have before I open up the floor to Mr. Wald, the property owner.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Commissioners, questions? Again, I'm keeping an eye on Commissioner Simmons to see if he has any questions. There are no questions at this time. So at this point of time, the City Commission acts as the Board of Adjustment.
Correct.
And the appeal is that, can you read his appeal to us? Do you have that with you by chance, Mr. Johnson, or is that not necessary? Just the fact that he wants to leave his pickup in the backyard. I observed it this morning also. I drove to the site.
Want him to speak.
I was there at 3 o'clock this afternoon.
Commissioner Olson did too.
I think the property owner is here and he could certainly present his appeal. It was very simple. It was maybe 4 sentences appeal.
What is the gentleman's name again?
Jeffrey Wald.
Jeffrey Walls, are you in the room, sir? Yes. Please join us at the podium. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Good evening. Could you restate your name, please, for the record,
Jeffrey
and
Wald.
your address?
Jeffrey Wald, 978 Albert Drive West, West Fargo.
Okay. What would you like to share with us as to?
So I just, I mean, I understand that there's ordinances and stuff and, but I just don't, I'm kind of at a loss for what, I mean, I don't understand how it's hurting anything and improved surface. I just felt like I know it's there now and the snow is gone, but it felt like maybe a layer of snow and frozen ground is an improved surface. It's not soft or anything where it's going to sink into the lawn or anything. And when spring comes, I move it and it's not, you can't park it on the street unless we move it every 3 days. And I mean, it's an older vehicle, but it's in good shape. And I use it in the wintertime when the snow gets deep and stuff. And I just feel like without a place to park it, I mean, there's only one side of the street that can be parked on anyway. And that's the side where all the driveways are. So there's really no parking on any of the streets there except for that one side street. And there is the ordinance where you have to move it every 3 days. Well, I mean, it's an older vehicle and it's a big block and they don't start that easy. So I mean, to start it every 3 days in the wintertime, if it's 10 below, 20 below, you know, that's hard on them and stuff. And like I say, it's not something that I need every day. It's not my normal vehicle. I haul my grandkids around and stuff. So I use a van, but then if the snow gets deep, then sometimes I have to use that. And I just, I mean, if it's behind my house and there's a fence on the other side, on the street side, and I mean, you really don't even notice it if unless you're looking for it. And I mean, I understand the ordinances are what they are, but I just feel like there should be some type of an amendment to the ordinance or something to allow, you know,
to allow a person that has that situation to, whether it even be, I mean, even just, charge or put a policy in place to charge the homeowner if they want to, put it out there for the winter months only and stuff. And, I mean, our hands are really tied. There's really nothing else we can do. I mean, you can't really, I mean, you got to have the vehicle when you need it and stuff. And if you don't have it there, yeah, you can put it in storage or something, then it's not available, and that's all costs money as well. And I just feel like for what a person pays to be a homeowner and special assessments and all that, I just feel there should be some type of amendment to the ordinance to allow some of that stuff to, and I'm not saying we should open a whole new can of worms and so everybody's parking vehicles that don't run and stuff in their backyards and stuff. I mean, I just feel like if it's licensed and insured and everything, and if it's able to start and drive it away at any point in time, I mean, I just feel like there's got to be some middle ground there to accommodate homeowners in a better way.
So your side neighbors, do they have fences?
They have fences, and we have we have a shared fence with my neighbor I'm on a corner lot, so there's only one side.
So when you're going to use the vehicle, how do you get it out of the backyard?
I just drive it over off the curb.
Any other questions of this gentleman? Commissioner Olson?
So why can't you park it on your driveway? Just curious. Well, I mean, if you park in the driveway, well, then you got to shovel snow around it. And then if it's, I'm going to have another vehicle too. I have a trailer, a moving trailer that my company uses. I have to keep that. They're parked there somewhere, and I parked that on the side street one time for a week or two last summer at different times, and then trying to move it every 3 days too. And woke up one morning and had a message from Highway Patrol who lives 2 houses down from me and said, "Hey, your trailer's in the middle of the street." So he was parked on the street, and somebody came by with a lowboy semi and clipped it and drug the whole thing out in the middle of the street and didn't tell me or anything. So I mean, it's an 8-foot wide trailer, which is legal to park there, but it sticks out there, and the streets are so narrow. Like I say, there's not a lot of room for it.
Where do you park it in the summertime?
Well, in the summertime, I park it at the business place, but they don't want me to park it in their parking lot in the wintertime for snow removal.
So to get it in your backyard, you cross our sidewalks,
Correct.
and the sidewalks are not made for vehicles to travel over.
It means I don't drive, it's not like I drive over it every day, but yeah, that's correct.
Additional questions? Mr. Walsh? Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
Mr. Johnson, do you have anything to add, or commissioners have any additional questions of Mr. Johnson?
I just have a comment, Mayor.
Please, Commissioner Simmons, you have the floor.
Thank you. I hope everyone can hear me, but I think we would be setting a dangerous precedent here if we allowed this to continue, just for the simple fact individuals driving over our sidewalk, he's admitted to that. As well as, there's also other people that live next to that see that as well. He mentioned there are no special conditions. I would imagine he could amend it to put a slab in the backyard, and then he could have it on that, I guess, would be one option he would have. But I would definitely recommend that we wouldn't allow this.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Is that in the form of a motion?
Yes, it is. That's a motion to deny.
Commissioner Simmons has moved to deny. Item number 5, the appeal of the interpretation of 4-446 of the city ordinances at 978 Albert Drive West. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Jurdevig seconds. It's been moved and seconded to deny the appeal at the address of 978 Albert Drive West. Is there any further discussion?
Just one question.
Commissioner Olson.
So if the motion passes, what's the next step in the process? Just want to know what will take place.
Mr. Johnson, Mr. Shockley.
It'll get referred to municipal court and we'll prosecute it.
Okay.
Okay.
Did you hear the answer to that, sir, in the back? Okay. All right. Very good. All right. Any further discussion?
I'll just make a real quick
Please,
comment.
Commissioner George.
I mean, I feel for this gentleman, it's his property, so I get it, I get that point, but yet having to drive over the curb and the sidewalk and doing potential damage is a problem. I have a trailer, I pay to store it in the winter, so.
Thank you, Commissioner George. Further discussion? We'll proceed to vote. All those in favor of denying the appeal, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Commissioner Sermons voted in the affirmative on that. Item number 6 is the fire headquarters preliminary design funding request. Chief Fuller, Fire Chief for the City of West Fargo. Welcome, Chief.
Thank you, Commissioner President Dardis, members of the commission. What we have before you today is a request for funding the preliminary design phase of this project. So it would give us an overall, we have to go through this process to get an overall cost estimate of what the actual building is going to be. We do have a preliminary idea in our heads of what our estimated cost is going to be, but this is the first step in the process. So the request tonight is to fund the preliminary design phase of the project for $200,000. The result will have a clean design and a more accurate final cost of this project. The recommendation will be to approve the request. In addition to having finance put an account together to start keeping track of all the accounting for this building project, this will also result in the building committee being formed. The requests for qualifications for architects and construction managers going out, reviews of those RFQs, and then moving forward, I'd probably be back here in May with hopefully with a good answer or a good firm to hire for architectural services. Just for information, the committee we're looking at here is Commissioner Simmons, Commissioner George, City Administrator Tina Fisk, City Building Inspector Mark Hausch, myself, Finance Director Jim Larson, and Deputy Chief Kendall Frost. And we work together on this whole project moving forward for the next 18 months. The financial analysis on this, again, $200,000. This is included in the total cost of the project. When we came in and said 10 million, this is the first little tiny bit of it. Coming from Capital Improvement Sales Tax Fund as of right now, an unencumbered balance that covers the cost of this phase. The timeline is to release RFQs for architecture firms on March 22nd. They would be back on April 12th, and we would be bringing forward a recommendation for an architectural firm on the May 3rd meeting of this year, and then hopefully have something on paper by July. Short and sweet. I'll stand for any questions you have.
Thank you, Chief. Questions of Chief Fuller? Commissioners?
Move to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner George. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the preliminary design funding request of $200,000 as presented this evening by Dan Fuller, Fire Chief of the City of West Fargo. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Commissioner Simmons voted in the affirmative.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Item number 7 is the West Fargo Police Department's 2020 Annual Report. Dennis Otterness, Chief of Police for the City of West Fargo. Welcome, Chief.
Thank you, President Dardis and members of the commission. Real briefly, I understand the report is about 32 pages long, so I don't intend to go over the entire annual report with you tonight. But before I start on that, I too wanted to publicly recognize Sergeant Terry Stife, and I appreciate your comments, President Dardis. 32 years is a long time to commit to the City of West Fargo and our community members and our police department. And certainly it's not just Sergeant Stife that made that commitment. It was a family commitment too over those 32 years. So to recognize the commitment that his family made, his wife, his son Garrett, and Sergeant Stife, we're very appreciative of the work that he put into this police department. I had the good fortune of working in with him back in the early 90s when we started relatively close to the same time. So it's been fun to come back and be able to work with him over the last 6 months as well. So I appreciate those comments. So as it relates to the 2020 annual report, as part of the annual report, the West Fargo Police Department would like to honor and remember Grand Forks Police Officer Cody Holte. On May 27, 2020, Officer Holte was killed in the line of duty while assisting on a call in Grand Forks where fellow officers had been fired upon while serving an eviction notice. We would also like to dedicate our 2020 annual report to all first responders and healthcare workers who battled during the pandemic courageously, and to the memory of the 331 police officers nationwide who have lost their fight against the coronavirus in 2020. While the city of West Fargo continues to experience significant growth, I'm happy to report that the overall crime rate in the city of West Fargo has declined 2%. And we've had an 11% decrease in violent crime over the last year since 2019. I'm also happy to report that the city of West Fargo is named the safest city in North Dakota for the third straight year. And I believe this is a testament to the continued partnership between our community members and the members of our police department to help prevent crime within the city. Despite working through a global pandemic, the department has continued to reach our community in a variety of ways. Our community outreach efforts demonstrate our commitment to partnering with our school district, our businesses, our residents and visitors, and displays our core values of respect, teamwork, and integrity. Our law enforcement officers with the West Fargo Police Department are highly trained and motivated personnel, ready to protect life and safeguard property in an impartial, effective, and efficient manner. I look forward to what 2021 will bring, and I want to thank the community and our commissioners for their continued support of the West Fargo Police Department. I hope you enjoy the annual report that highlights our accomplishments in 2020. The men and women of the West Fargo Police Department look forward to continuing to partner together as one community to make West Fargo the best city to live, work, and play. And with that, I'll stand for any questions you might have.
Thank you, Chief. Questions of Chief Auditors? I might mention that Commissioner Mark Simmons holds the portfolio for the police department. And he is the liaison with the department and fire. Anything? Chief, we're very, excuse me, please.
Just a comment. It's just amazing, all the data that's there, and to see what goes on that we don't know that's happening around us, that you keep us all safe, that we don't have to worry about. That's just a testament to you and your department. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
One
We've
of the
got
other
a tremendous
things-
staff, our civilian and our sworn staff, just go out and do a tremendous job for the citizens of West Fargo every day.
We're blessed. We truly are. The 3 years in a row as the safest city in North Dakota speaks volumes in itself. I know that there's mayors in the surrounding area that are very jealous of that. And we very much appreciate the safety that you provide for our citizens. You mentioned that, you know, in the last several years, there's been 2 fallen officers, you know, in the region, one in Fargo and one in Grand Forks. I've never been prouder of the West Fargo Police Department at those very solemn events. Mayor Brown had invited me to join him at the funeral in Grand Forks, and I sat with Mayor Brown. And the commitment of those people, of the families that send these brave men and women out every day into the public, we're very grateful. So thank you all for you do to keep our community safe. Chief, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
The next order of business is item number 8, and that's to review the City of West Fargo's mask strategy. This item is one that I brought forward. The City of West Fargo at the beginning of COVID, in which last week we celebrated is probably not a right word, a 1 year of dealing with COVID. Our city employees, this commission, our business community and their employees, our firefighters and first responders, our police department, continue to work through the public during all of this very troubling time. And they did it in a very professional manner, continue to provide services at the highest level. And so with that being said, I have 3 COVID updates a week still of keeping and tracking how the virus has moved through our communities. I also want to commend those people that they felt that their personal freedoms were infringed upon. Because our community, our public, despite maybe a difference in that, continued to be supportive. And that's how we've got to the point that we're at today. I checked with the hospitals across the state of North Dakota today through the North Dakota Department of Public Health, and there's 16 people, only 16 people. It doesn't seem appropriate to say only, but there's 16 people that are hospitalized. We know so much more about the virus than we did in a very, very long, throughout this year. Our positivity rate is at 2.3%, that the people are continuing to contract at. Public Health wanted us to be low 4%. So we've achieved that. At one time, in the 58078 zip code, West Fargo, we had, on one given day, we had 357 of our residents infected with the COVID virus. 357 that lived in the 58078 zip code. Today we have 11. So with that being said, I brought this forward to reconsider. The staff has been an integral part of advising the commission as to what we're comfortable with regard to the mask strategy. And I want to emphasize the mask strategy isn't just about wearing a mask. There's many other elements in there about occupancies and things like that. Well, we've reached a point in this, and the fact that we're inoculating a lot of people. At the present time, there's 14.8% of the citizens in North Dakota that have been inoculated. We're not quite at herd immunity as the professionals like to call it. But in a conversation that Mrs. Fisk and I had this morning with Public Health, there is much more vaccine on its way. CVS pharmacies were approved just last week by the Biden administration. So not only is Thrifty Drug, so there's going to be access of people outside the priority list for vaccines. So commissioners, the purpose of bringing this to you this evening is for your consideration for the city of West Fargo to terminate the mask strategy that we've extended twice. Your discussion, please.
Well, I'd just like to say that I liken this to a football game. If we only have about 15% of the citizens vaccinated, we're on our 15-yard line. We've got 85 yards to go before we dare say we've scored a touchdown. We can spike the ball or drop the ball. And by dropping the mask strategy, you know, our initiative here to wear a mask, we would fumble and we could go backwards. And then it'll just be tougher to go back to it. So I would feel more comfortable if we extended it, not extend it past May, but we keep it until for another month, because we had how many residents in Bismarck this past weekend watching a Class A tournament. And if you looked at the people in the stands, hardly anybody was wearing masks. And they're all coming back to our community. We got spring break going on, people taking vacations, going to all parts of the country. We're going to have Easter coming up. We're going to have family gatherings. And what got us to this point is by wearing what I'm wearing right now, a mask. So I would respect that we keep it at least another month to get our inoculations to at least 50% or greater.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Additional discussion? Commissioner George.
It sounds like Fargo will be dropping their mandate on March 22nd. I'd like to make a motion for West Fargo to drop our mask strategy as of March 22nd to be in alignment with the rest of the community.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
You know, I will make a second to that, but just to explain
Please,
it if I could.
Commissioner Jurdovic.
You know, when I look at the mask strategy, just to build off of the point Mayor Dardis was making, you know, technically speaking, it still says that large indoor gatherings should be approved by the city commission well, we didn't approve most of the basketball games that happened in this town in the last month. So we're not following, there's a lot of other stuff in here beyond just a recommendation to wear a mask. So, I absolutely hope to the point of we don't want to spike the ball on the 5-yard line. I absolutely hope that we continue to recommend social distancing and wearing a mask if it's appropriate. But I would second the motion to end this on March 22nd. And like I said, but I absolutely am a firm believer that we're not there yet too. So.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdevig. Is there further discussion?
Mayor?
Yes, Commissioner Simmons, you have the floor.
Yes, I know I heard Commissioner George mention Fargo. Nobody can sit up there and say they're going to do that 100%. So do we have some better inside information as to what they're doing?
I have had a conversation last week with Mayor Mahoney, and he indicated that they had the votes that they believe that they would, it would be March 22nd would be the last day of, they have a mask mandate. We have, of course, a strategy that has been different all along here, but that's my understanding is what their commission will act on.
Okay.
All right. Is there any further discussion? I couldn't agree more with Commissioner Olson or Commissioner Jurdevig when it comes to the part that we're not through this yet. We've got where we are today because of the personal responsibility of the residents in our community. Whether it was always wearing a mask or occasionally wearing a mask, washing their hands and social distancing and changing maybe some of their social patterns of what we did. They were personal choices. And I would certainly hope as we continue to move forward and see where we are with the inoculations of the serums and the like, that we do that. And this commission has what's in its authority that if we start to spike, if we start to turn around, we could again act on this as we deem appropriate. So again, we have on the floor a motion to terminate the mask strategy as implemented by the City of West Fargo and its commission on March 22nd. Is there any further discussion? I want all the commissioners to be heard on this issue. Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. A 4-1 vote. Commissioner Simmons voted in the affirmative. Thank you all. Staff, thank you for all that you've done to keep City Hall operating and providing services. We greatly appreciate that. With, of course, the risk that comes with that in meeting with the public. So I salute you. Item number 10 is project number 2260, approve plans and specifications and authorize a bid advertisement. Mr. Dustin Scott, city engineer for the City of West Fargo. Mr. Scott. Oh boy, did I approve? Yeah, I did that. I did. My apologies to the community. Item number 9 is project number 1316.2, approve plans and specifications, authorize a bid advertisement, and approve task order number 18-4. Mr. Scott, my apologies.
Thank you, Commissioner President Dardis and members of the commission. As you are familiar by now with project number 1316, it's our North Side Sanitary Sewer Collector Rehabilitation Project.
Thank you.
What you see in your packet here on the very top portion of this agenda summary sheet here is the new information and our new recommendation here moving forward. Below this dash line is the previous agenda item that I presented at the last meeting, which was the engineer's report. So really, I'm going to try to make this brief and ask the commission very specifically to approve the plans and specifications that are based upon the engineer's report that you approved last meeting. Authorize the bid advertisement and of course approve task order number 18-4, which is for the design and construction administration services that we would have in place with more engineering. And as all task orders, that is in accordance with our master service agreement that was established back in 2018. So with that, I would stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Any questions for Mr. Scott?
I'll make the motion to approve the plans and specs and authorize advertisement for task order number 18-4.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdovic seconds. It's been moved and seconded to approve project number 1316-.2, approve the plans and specifications and authorize a bid advertisement. Task order number 18-4. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Commissioner Simmons voted in the affirmative. Item number 10 is project number 2260, approve the plans and specifications and authorize a bid advertisement. Mr. Dustin Scott, city engineer for the city of West Fargo.
Thank you again, Commission President Dardis and members of the commission. Similar to the last item here, this particular item has been before the commission, and the information you see at the top half of the summary sheet is our new provided information and recommendation. If you recall, at the last meeting when I presented the engineer's estimate, we did talk about a safety enhancement near the Costco and Taco Bell access area there. We have since looked at the costs to put a median to close off that access. The cost of that work is about $50,000. Since our last meeting, we've also had a coordination meeting with the city of Fargo regarding a couple of sites that were scheduled to be repaired on Veterans Boulevard. The city of Fargo has asked that they do that work within their project. It is in the northbound lanes. We did remove a couple of those sites from our estimate. And so now the revised estimate that you have in your packet reflects an increase of $33,000 from what I presented at the last meeting. So our current project estimate is $1,263,000. Beyond that, I guess, again, we're asking for the approval of the plans and specifications and authorize the bid advertisement, as well as there are resolutions approving plans and a resolution directing bid advertisement in this packet as well. So again, I will stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Questions for Mr. Scott?
I would make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdovic. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner George seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve item number 2260, approve plans and specifications and authorize a bid advertisement. Is there any further discussion? Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Commissioner Simmons voted in the affirmative. Item number 11, Sidewalk Improvement District 6056, approve the plans and specifications and authorize a bid advertisement. Mr. Scott?
Thank you again, Commissioner President Dardis, members of the commission. Again, just like the last two, I've got new information on the top of this agenda summary here. And as you can see, we've been before the commission a few times here. The last meeting, we actually presented the task order for the design and construction services for this sidewalk district. And so at this point now, we're looking for the formal approval of the plans and specifications so that we can also move forward and advertise the bids. Like the previous meeting or previous items, there's the resolutions that correlate with these actions included in your packet. So again, I will stand for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Questions for Mr. Scott?
I'll make the motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Jurdovic. It's been moved and seconded to approve the Sidewalk Improvement District number 6056, to approve the plans and specifications and authorize engineering for a bid advertisement. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Commissioner Simmons voted in the affirmative.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Item number 12 is ordinance number 1182, revising and update the criminal and traffic ordinances to match the state statute and to update the city's bicycle regulations to match current practice. Mr. Shockley, City Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President. Tonight is the first reading of ordinance number 1182. As you noted, is an update of some criminal and traffic ordinances to match state statute and clarify some offense classifications coming out of the municipal court. Also, the intent is to reflect the current practice of the PD relating to police department relating to bicycles. Just briefly, we've changed the public consumption. We've made some changes to disorderly conduct, made some revisions to DUI provisions to match state law, along with some careless driving changes and bicycle changes, along with an unattended animal in a motor vehicle. So pretty straightforward changes. Can certainly answer any questions you might have, but it's really just updates and cleanups. Sometimes this happens as the municipal court prosecutes cases and we get changes to state law every now and then, so.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Are there questions? Mr. Shockley, with regarding the updating the criminal and traffic ordinances to match the state statute and the update of the city's bicycle regulations to match our current practice and policy. Questions of Mr. Shockley? Okay. Commissioners, your thoughts?
I would make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdevig. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the ordinance change to 1182, revising and updating the criminal and traffic ordinances to match the state statute. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Commissioner Simmons voted in the affirmative. Item number 13 is the city administrator's report. This is Tina Fisk, City Administrator, City of West Fargo.
Good evening, Commission President and Commissioners. I have listed 4 items underneath here. They were items that at the last meeting, you tasked staff with either looking into or reviewing the items. And so I wanted to bring you back just a little update on what our thoughts were from the staff level of how to manage each one going forward. The very first one is you directed staff to meet with Mr. Elton Tufty. He raised concerns about a change order for District 2250 and expressed that he wanted more information. And so you directed Dustin Scott, our city engineer, to get with NDDOT, the different engineering firms, Dakota Underground, and discuss what happened with this change order. On March 4th, staff reached out to Mr. Tufty to schedule the meeting as previously directed, and I attached the emails there. Mr. Tufty replied that he would not attend the meeting at the scheduled date or any time thereafter. And I just wanted to give you that update because as he is not wanting to meet, he's not interested in meeting, the matter is thereby closed unless you direct us to do something different.
Commission, do you have any direction for Mrs. Fisk?
Mayor,
Commissioner Simmons, you have the floor.
thank you very much. I think that we have given Mr. Tufty enough time and especially with our staff. And I think we've given him plenty of time over the last few years. I would like to make a motion actually that this is completely closed, that we close this and no more of this discussion take place.
We have a motion on the floor that this item, change order 2250 by Commissioner Simmons, is closed. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on item 2250 and the change order?
So
Commissioner.
I don't necessarily disagree with the spirit of the motion maybe, but I guess I would ask whether I mean, this still has to go in front of the special assessment committee. To me, the issue can't be closed by the commission because it'll come back to us to approve the assessment then after that, right?
By definition, you're correct. I think what Commissioner Simmons is that it's closed with regard to directing staff to move forward or trying to accumulate anything else.
Then, okay. If that's the
But
motion, I appreciate
you're
the
absolutely right, Commissioner. This will be
Okay.
still under consideration as to how the assessments are assigned and all of those things. So great point on your part. Thank you.
Okay.
Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Commissioner Simmons voted in the affirmative. Item, please continue, Mrs. Fisk.
Okay, thank you so much, President Dardis. The next thing is you had requested that that staff meet with the Special Assessment Committee and discuss the potential of bringing them in earlier in the process, reviewing our district boundaries, things like that. And so what I plan on doing, and I have a memo in here lining it up, I know our chair of the committee gets back in April. And so the plan was to meet with that committee early April and get a consensus on how they feel about including this in their process. And then I'll bring that information back to you as a commission. If you approve, then I'll incorporate it into the assessment guidelines that we're updating right now. So that was just more informational again. Next item that you had asked was you directed staff to review the process for potential annexation of the Red River Valley Fair and surrounding properties. In meeting with staff and meeting with Mr. Shockley, our attorney, there's a lot of information out there. And so this is what I'm requesting for you to consider. Allow the city staff to work with Mr. Shockley and come up with a presentation with options and thoughts. And we'll work on that through April 30th. And then on either May 10th or May 24th, we would work on setting up a brown bag meeting with the city commission to discuss the options for annexation that you have and to review the options and to have you as a city commission give staff directive on next steps, if any. And so if you're okay with that timeline, that's how staff will proceed moving forward.
Commissioner George?
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment. Okay, I apologize to Commissioner Jurdevig that I'm going to say this. All right. I feel like personally, after having some discussions with the public and Mr. Cashman, I feel like I'm a hard no on this annexation. And I don't know if anybody else feels that way at this point, but that's where I'm at. And I personally don't know if we should be spending that much staff time on something if it isn't going to move forward any farther, but I don't know how anybody else feels on this at this point. So.
I am a no also.
Commissioner Simmons, would you restate that, please?
Yes, I am a no also.
You're a hard no. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Mayor?
I think, did you have something, please? Commissioner Olson?
Mayor?
Yeah, okay, excuse me. Commissioner Simmons, finish your comments, please.
Thank you. I don't want to stop by saying a hard no, but I am. But I want to explain a little bit just because of the fact that, you know, other than yourself being involved, we were the only two there at the time when we went through this last process. And there's a lot of pros and cons to this. And if our staff is going to move forward, I would like to include that they come up with pros and cons into annexation. But there's, the bottom line is this in reality. If the Fair Board, which they do not appear to want to join us, then you can spin words all you want, but the bottom line is it's eminent domain. And that is not a good thing for our city. That is not a good road for us to go down. That's the primary reason I'm against it. If they're willing to come in on their own, that's a different story. But if this is going to go down the road of eminent domain, my friends, we do not want to go down that road. Thank you.
Mr. Simmons. I'm going to refer to Mr. Shockley regarding your comment on eminent domain. Mr. Shockley.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President. Just for clarification, it's annexation. It would be an annexation through resolution. It wouldn't be eminent domain. Eminent domain is actually taking somebody's property and compensating them. And just because I know the sensitivity around the press on this issue, it wouldn't be eminent domain, it would be annexation. So just for clarification.
Commissioner
I guess-
Olson, Commissioner Olson has the floor.
I just want to make a comment that we're not actually moving forward with any kind of formal plans of annexation. We're just exploring what the facts are, pro and or con of doing this. This would happen with any property, whether it be the fairgrounds or maybe someplace on the other side of West Fargo. It isn't just that we're dead set on this is what we're going to do. We're just exploring what's the possibilities are and what ramifications both ways. We're not actually going through the process of saying we're going full steam ahead with this process. It's just an exploratory mission that we're asking staff to bring to us, the decision makers, what there is.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Commissioner Jurdevig.
Well, and I'm just going to, again, reinforce the reason for this is that our West Side residents and our Main Avenue businesses have paid higher special assessments for decades on any project on that part of town because we have not been able to have the fairgrounds in Bonanzaville pay their fair share. So a vote for this is basically forcing a portion of West Fargo to financially support the fairgrounds through a tax when the rest of West Fargo doesn't have to. Like, to me, that should be illegal. And that's the driving reason why I believe it's important to move forward with.
Yeah, and to Commissioner Jurdevig, and I know he knows this, the city of West Fargo cannot assess any entity that's not within its city limits. And the fact that the fairgrounds is where it is, and Bonanzaville and the owned by the Historical Society is so, you know, the summary or the conclusion that you bring up is correct, but at the same time, it's not part of our city. So why should they pay an assessment? The fact that they're by geographic proximity, they do benefit from it. And I think that the point that in all the conversations that I've had with Commissioner Jurdevig is that they certainly benefit from all the improvements. And thus, but they're not in the city of West Fargo. So it's illegal for us to assess them. Anyone else have anything else? Commissioner George?
Mayor?
Commissioner George and then Commissioner Simmons.
Well, I was just going to say, I don't know how this will go, but again, I don't want to waste time if we already know we're not going to pursue this unless people want to still have a conversation. But I would personally make a motion to stop conversations as far as moving forward on the annexation. So I would make that motion tonight. But you can see how everybody else feels.
I will second that with some more conversation though.
I have a motion and a second on the floor to stop the conversation on annexation of the fairground. Commissioner Simmons, you have the floor.
Thank you. First of all, I want to clarify what John had said. He's absolutely true, but again, the perception is that it's eminent domain, no matter how you spin this. Secondly, you commissioners might want to go back and look at the minutes, because in the minutes, you direct staff to specifically find a process on how to annex the fairgrounds in. That's what the minutes say, from my understanding of it. So again, but I just wanted to clarify that. So
For the public record, Commissioner Olson and myself are meeting with the fairgrounds tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. With Cody Cashman to just trying to clarify what the intent of this whole discussion is about. I've had 3 conversations with Mr. Cashman on the telephone, and I gather from Commissioner George that she's also visited with him. I've also had a couple of the Fair Board people call me. So, you know, the purpose of this is to have a discussion about how we deal with, again, the points that Commissioner Jurdevig makes about improvements that we make in that area of which they benefit from. So there's lots of things to discuss around that particular topic. So again, I've invited Commissioner Olson. He doesn't know Cody. I met Cody the first week he got here. So I wanted to have a conversation to explain to him directly from the commission of what this is. So any of the misgivings that the Fair Board has, or rumors, or all of that type of thing, that they heard it directly of what the intent was, not for annexation, certainly not to get rid of the fairgrounds. If you recall, during a very lengthy discussion for about 1.5 to 2 years, there was a possible agreement between the city of West Fargo and the fairgrounds with regard to a convention center. During that discussion, our legal counsel and their legal counsel created documents, beneficial documents to both entities with regard to annexation. So the annexation discussion on a very narrow type of topic that Commissioner Jurdevig has brought up, there's been a very broad conversation. We have documents that would lead to an annexation of this, of how the fairgrounds would continue to function, whether it be the pyrotechnics, the races, the animals, and having animals within the city of West Fargo. There's been a lot of work done on that preliminarily. Financially, it didn't work. So that discussion concluded. But there were mutual agreed process to go through this exact process. Mr. Cashman's never seen that. I was hoping that Commissioner Olson and I would show him that tomorrow. So we have a motion on the floor. We have a second. Obviously, to terminate and that the discussion that staff would have with regard to the process on annexation. Is there any further discussion? All right. We're going to proceed to vote. Oh, God. Excuse me. Yes, that's who I'm calling on right now for help. Because all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
We have a split vote on a 3-2 vote. Commissioner Simmons, Commissioner George, Commissioner Dardis are voting in the affirmative. Commissioner Jurdevig and Commissioner Olson voted no.
Okay,
Mrs. Fisk, please continue.
well, that'll free up.
And the
some
next
time.
one better be easier.
I promise it will be. At the last meeting, you also put a moratorium on the 3 to 5 year residential expansion exemption and the 5-year commercial expansion or remodeling, remodeling expansion exemptions. And you asked staff to take a look at these and come up with some recommendations. I put in your notes, you can see that as of 2020, the exempt amount for commercial remodeling exemption, the total value in dollars that was out there was $2,405,300, which is the estimated total tax for all taxing entities, school, county, us, of $36,090. The residential remodeling exemption was only $247,900, which is approximately $3,348 estimated dollars. What we were going to do is we want to bring the commercial portion through the EDAC board and get their thoughts and feelings on what they think would be good parameters and if they think there should be changes, and then bring that recommendation back to the commission at the April 19th meeting. That will give us time to meet with that board and have that discussion. So I just want to make sure that was okay, and that is the directive we'd take.
Commissioners, do you have any additional direction for Mrs. Fisk or insight? Everybody shaking their head no.
Well, see, I told
Thank
you,
you.
that one's easier. Now I have just a couple things. I just want to inform everybody that our city engineer, Dustin Scott, will be unavailable from March 29th till April 12th approximately. He is on the panel for choosing the winning bidder for the diversion, and they approximate a minimum of 12 hours a day, every single day, even straight through the weekends. So he's gonna be very, very busy. He's working with his staff to have them try and pick up some of the work that he otherwise would have to do, but I just ask you to be a little patient because he's gonna be really swamped.
What were those dates again?
March 29th through April 12th.
So the P3 bid from the diversion is coming in. And when you have a P3 bid where the contractors are bidding, they provide, and Mr. Shockley knows this so much better than I, but I've got the microphone right now, I guess. What it transpires is that the P3 bidders, they bid the technical elements as they perceive that they would propose. Mr. Scott is part of a technical review team, all engineers, the city engineer from Moorhead, city engineer from Fargo, city engineer from West Fargo, and a number of others. Mr. Shockley, are you also on the technical review team?
I am not.
Oh,
I only play an engineer.
He's on the financial review team.
He's smiling.
But
too.
yeah, but it is an extremely, because all the way that they're constructing bridges, how they're doing the levees, how they're doing the tiebacks, all of those types of things are reviewed by this technical team. It is a massive undertaking. They're reviewing about 33 miles of the diversion, technical elements of how the bidders have bid this project. So I'll be amazed if they can get it done in that timeline.
Well, I know Dustin's excited.
Protect West Fargo, Dustin. That's all I got to say. All right. Mrs. Fisk. please continue.
And the last thing I have is I just kind of want to fill you in. If any of you were aware, the city has a huge stockpile. We have stockpiles of dirt in lots of locations, but right now we have a huge stockpile at Trail King. And this was from a project that was like maybe 7 or 8 years ago. And rather than have the contractor take the dirt, at that time, the administration felt that they could sell it and get 80 cents a yard or something like that. I remember all of this. They had a couple contractors that said they were interested, but then the contractors realized they had enough of their own dirt. And so it sat there, and Trail King's like, we need you to eventually move this. And so a couple years ago, working with communications, Melissa Richard, we actually put it out on our website and tried to advertise it as, please take me. Take me if you want this. And very little has gone. Now we're at the point where Trail King needs that space. And so I just want you to know, in case anybody asks what's going on, Matt Anvig is working closely with Trail King, and they plan on moving the dirt sometime this summer, early fall, when they have time, and putting it over by the lagoon so that they can use it there.
Mr. Anvik, could you address, do you have an estimate on how many yards we're talking about? Just out of curiosity? 40 to 60,000 yards of dirt? Okay.
Give or take.
Okay, all right, well, I wanted to know if it was a big pile or a little pile. Obviously a big pile, okay.
It's a big pile. Yep.
Arizona has a 90,000 yard file, and I think over the last 7 years, it's dwindled down to about, if I had to guess, I'd say 60,000.
Is that part of the Main Avenue reconstruction, that dirt?
It was part of the expansion of the Butler retention pond.
Oh, okay, all right. Very good. All
So
right,
just in
thank you.
case anybody's wondering about the dirt, we didn't buy it, it was ours, and they're gonna work on hauling it over to the diversion, so. And that's all I have for you. Do you have anything for
If
me?
anybody in the audience needs some dirt, please raise your hand. All right, thank you. Any questions for Mrs. Fisk? Please, Commissioner George.
I had somebody call me and ask me about this. Do we know where we're at on the appraisals on the Cheyenne Street homes?
I'm not sure if Lauren's here. I can speak if she's not. Oh, okay. An appraiser has been obtained, and they are working on getting the 5 appraisals done. I believe I heard her say today, they're hoping to have something beginning mid-April back. And then once we get the information together, we'll bring it back to you as commissioners.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Commissioner George. Good question. Anybody else have anything for Mrs. Fisk? You have any correspondence for us?
No, I do not. Thank you.
Okay. No more questions. Thank you, Mrs. Fisk. Are there any non-agenda items that any of the commissioners would like to bring forward at this time? Is there any non-agenda items that any of the staff or department heads would like to bring forward at this time? All right, is there anything from the public that they'd like to bring on as a non-agenda item for this evening? Commissioner Simmons?
Move to adjourn.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Commissioner Simmons moved. Commissioner Olson seconds. We stand adjourned. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Mark.